Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have Sigyn Therapeutics, Inc. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol SIGYD and is a development stage medical technology company headquartered in San Diego. And the company's therapeutic candidates are each designed to overcome a clearly defined limitation in healthcare. Happy to welcome the CEO, Jim Joyce. Nice to see you, Jim.
Nice to see you, and I appreciate the introduction. Before we get started today, I want to share our forward-looking statements. These statements are also available on our website under the presentations button, and that website URL is sigyntherapeutics.com. With that said, if you're not familiar with Sigyn Therapeutics, we create medical devices to treat life-threatening conditions. And we have two classes of product candidates. The first are devices to treat pathogen-associated disorders that are beyond the reach of drugs. And we have a series of devices that we've designed to improve patient responses to cancer therapies. The convergence of medical devices to enhance cancer drug therapies, this has the potential to be a new product category. As it relates to our pathogen-associated disorders that are beyond the reach of drugs, our lead technology is known as Sigyn Therapy, and we're preparing to initiate first-in-human studies. This technology has the unprecedented capability to dually clear inflammatory mediators in combination with pathogen sources of life-threatening inflammation. Candidate treatment indications include the #1 cause of hospital deaths in the United States. As it relates to improving patient responses to cancer therapies, we have a series of products that we've designed to do so. Immune Prep is a platform, or essentially a commercialization platform, to enhance delivery of immunotherapeutic antibodies to treat cancer. These are the top selling drugs in the cancer space. Chemo Prep is designed to enhance the delivery of chemotherapeutic agents. These are the most commonly administered cancer drug. And ChemoPure is administered to reduce the toxicity of chemotherapy. In regards to our lead product, Sigyn Therapy, this is a picture of Sigyn Therapy in action at University of Michigan animal studies. The device is designed to work on the global infrastructure of dialysis machines already located in hospitals and clinics worldwide. And in this case, Sigyn's being delivered on a dialysis machine manufactured by Fresenius, the global leader in the dialysis industry. As previously mentioned, this technology provides for the simultaneous clearance of inflammatory mediators and pathogen sources of life-threatening inflammation. In vitro human blood plasma validations, these are studies that are preclinical studies that replicate the process of treating humans. We've demonstrated the ability to address viral pathogens, to address bacterial toxins, both gram-negative and gram-positive bacterial toxins, hepatic toxins, primary inflammatory mediators. This includes interleukin-6, interleukin-1A, and TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor, and cytovesicles, which is a target that hasn't been addressed previously. These are larger vesicles that circulate in the bloodstream and carry inflammatory cargoes. As a result of these capabilities, our therapeutic opportunities are expansive and provide us the opportunity to address several unmet needs in global health, including sepsis, which is the leading cause of hospital deaths, endotoxemia, which is a common trigger for sepsis, drug-resistant viral pathogens. There's an increasing incidence beyond COVID-19, global warming, international travel, and urban crowding are increasing the incidence of the emergence of drug-resistant viruses. And another threat is emerging drug-resistant bacterial infections. Our next step is first-in-human studies of Sigyn Therapy. We have drafted an investigational device exemption for FDA submission. This will be submitted to the Centers for Diseases and Radiological Health. This is a modular feasibility study, and what this means is this is a study where we demonstrate safety and we leverage that safety study into multiple indications. Our lead indication is going to be dialysis-dependent end-stage renal disease patients with endotoxemia and concurrent inflammation. We plan to enroll as per our protocol, which we've designed in collaboration with senior executives at dialysis industry organizations. We plan to enroll 12 to 15 of these ESRD patients. We've identified 3 site locations: Hartford, Connecticut, San Antonio, Texas, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Some things to know about ESRD: greater than 50% of these patients suffer from endotoxemia and/or chronic inflammation. These conditions are currently untreatable. There's over 550,000 ESRD patients in the United States that receive approximately 85 million dialysis treatments each year. Some other things to know: once somebody initiates dialysis, there's a 30% likelihood that these patients die within their first year after initiating dialysis. Cardiovascular disease followed by sepsis and infections are leading causes of ESRD deaths. And endotoxemia and concurrent inflammation, our targets, are the hallmark causes of all of these conditions. In North America, the dialysis industry is dominated by 2 organizations, Fresenius Medical Care and DaVita Kidney Health. Both of the companies are publicly traded, both with market caps of approximately $11 billion. In terms of our technology being valuable to the dialysis industry, Sigyn Therapy offers a potential new revenue channel. It provides a pathway into non-dialysis markets, and these other markets are often addressed in the ICU at hospitals where dialysis machines exist. And as it relates to non-dialysis markets, this also expands an opportunity for dialysis companies to address ESRD patients when they are hospitalized each year. And they're hospitalized on average a couple weeks a year. And when they're hospitalized, the dialysis companies do not gain revenues. The patients are out of network, and the ability to get into the ICU can add hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues potentially to the dialysis companies each year. But the largest revenue gains come from extending the life of ESRD patients. And I want to discuss for both companies, DaVita and Fresenius, how this could impact their revenue chain. In 2022, DaVita generated $11.6 billion in revenues based on administering 30 million dialysis treatments to their almost 200,000 ESRD patient population. For each month of extended life of that patient population, that's worth $960 million in additional revenues. For Fresenius, the number is even larger. They generated $14.5 billion in revenues in 2022, treating over 200,000 ESRD patients. And for each month of extended life, that adds $1.2 billion in additional revenues. With that said, I now want to move on to our devices to improve patient responses to cancer therapies. Something you need to know, something you probably don't know, is that both chemotherapy and immunotherapeutic antibodies are poorly delivered to their intended cancer targets. And in fact, in general, published reports would indicate that less than 2% of chemotherapy and immunotherapeutic antibodies are successfully delivered to their targets. So consider that less than $200 or no more than $200 of a $10,000 drug course will generally provide patient benefit. And we're looking to overcome some of these limitations. So our focus is enhancing the performance of drugs. We design devices to optimize the delivery of chemotherapy and therapeutic antibodies. And we do this by extracting circulating decoys that are sequestering drugs or interfering with the delivery of drugs to reach their intended cancer targets. Clinical objective is straightforward: improve drug delivery, reduce toxicity, and extend patient life. I'm going to start with chemotherapy. Some things you need to know. This is the most common class of drugs administered to cancer patients. Patient benefit is limited by toxicity and poor tumor site delivery. And a major cause of poor tumor site delivery are tumor-derived exosomes that obstruct delivery. And these particles can block and sequester chemotherapy delivery. Amazingly, they can even export chemotherapy back out of tumor cells once it's been successfully delivered. And these are factors that are prime contributors to treatment resistance. As it relates to the circulating presence of tumor-released exosomes and their impact on blocking or disrupting the delivery of chemotherapy, as per this publication entitled The Biology and Function of Exosomes, published and authored by Raghu Kalari at MD Anderson Medical Center in Houston, Dr. Kalari references the blood of cancer patients is estimated to contain about 4,000 trillion exosomes, and based on an average size of 100 nanometers, that's miles of chemotherapy interference that's circulating in the bloodstream to disrupt the delivery of chemotherapy. So our solution is a system, ChemoPrep and ChemoPure. There's a patent underlying this entitled Systems and Methods to Enhance Chemotherapy Delivery and Reduce Toxicity. That's pending. We filed this in 2022. ChemoPrep is administered prior to chemotherapy infusion, and it can be administered in the same infusion centers on simple, easy-to-use blood processing systems. The objective is to pre-treat and sweep tumor-derived exosomes out of the bloodstream prior to the administration of chemo. Treatment goal is to improve chemo delivery, and in this case, I reference half a dose, which would equal a 50% reduction in toxicity alone. But it's more than just reducing toxicity. If you could deliver a half a dose, that could have a major impact on current supply chain issues that are occurring globally. Chemotherapy, as a result of biosimilars, has become a market that's not attractive for major drug companies, and we're reliant on chemotherapy being manufactured outside of the U.S., shipped into the U.S., and in the past couple of years, there's been significant shortages of chemotherapy that's resulted in patients not receiving their drugs or having their drugs rationed to these patients. So this is an issue that we have a potential to address. In regards to ChemoPure, if a majority of the chemotherapy is not delivered to its tumor cell targets, then it's being circulated elsewhere where it can impact and cause death of healthy patient cells. And at a certain point, chemotherapy that's in the circulatory system is more likely to cause patient toxicity than patient benefit. So we want to sweep that additional chemotherapy back out of the bloodstream to further reduce toxicity. And we have some good results in early preclinical studies. This is related to a formulation of adsorbent components where we demonstrated in 2 hours greater than 92% reduction of liposomes from human blood plasma. These historically have been models for studying tumor-derived exosomes. As it relates to immunotherapeutic antibodies, some things you need to know. These compounds represent 9 of the top 15 selling cancer drugs. And this includes Keytruda, which in 2023 is estimated to have done about $24 billion in revenues. And these are the most valued M&A assets in global health this past year. This includes the Pfizer acquisition of Sigyn, not Sigyn, Sigyn in Seattle, for $43 billion. Sigyn had a series of clinically approved therapeutic antibodies, but probably more impressive was the acquisition that Merck did of Prometheus Biosciences for $10.8 billion, because this company had no approved therapeutic antibodies. They're all clinical stage therapeutic antibody assets. And if you consider $10.8 billion, that's approximately the market value that I referenced earlier for Fresenius and DaVita. When we talk about immunotherapeutic antibodies, I just want you to know this is inclusive of monoclonal antibodies, checkpoint inhibitors, and antibody drug conjugates. There's over 1,000 antibodies right now being evaluated in human studies. However, there is no therapy that's been proposed prior to immune prep to address the drug decoys that inhibit the delivery of these drugs. Some things you need to know, as I mentioned earlier, less than 2% or less than $200 of a $10,000 dose is reported to be delivered to target binding sites. And the primary problem is circulating factors that express the antigen binding site of the antibody, these decoy delivery. And people think of antibodies as being highly selective, but in reality, they're highly selective for binding to a protein that's on the surface of the target. And this protein can be present on anti-drug antibodies, soluble proteins, and even exosomes, which I mentioned earlier. And a good example of this is referenced in this paper related to rituximab, which is a CD20 antibody. And as published in this paper, it was observed that half of rituximab was found to be fixed to exosomes 3 hours after the end of rituximab infusion. That's half a dose was bound by exosomes alone. So our solution is immune prep. This underlies a patent entitled Devices for Enhancing Activity of Therapeutic Antibodies that we filed in May of last year. Much like chemo prep, we're administering this prior to antibody infusion, and we can incorporate market-cleared antibodies to sweep drug decoys out of the bloodstream. Again, antibodies that have already been developed, demonstrated to be safe and effective, we can incorporate those to sweep out the decoys that would normally block or hinder the delivery or the intended delivery of the technology. We call this a reverse decoy mechanism, and we anticipate this will increase the availability of antibodies to bind with their intended targets. Now, I reference incorporates market-cleared antibodies. We are not restricted to market-cleared antibodies. If we can demonstrate the ability to enhance the benefit or enhance the delivery of therapeutic antibodies, certainly there's going to be opportunities to use our technology to enhance the delivery of clinical stage antibodies. And something that's also quite interesting is to resurrect antibodies that failed previous clinical studies. And this is, a majority of all antibodies moving through clinical studies won't be approved. And considering the cost of drug development, this might be an area of interest to biopharmaceutical organizations. So in conclusion, we create medical devices to treat life-threatening conditions. We have two classes of product candidates: a device to treat pathogen-associated disorders beyond the reach of drugs, and devices to improve patient responses to cancer therapies. Our lead product is Sigyn Therapy. We're preparing to initiate first-in-human studies. Again, unique in the sense that it provides dual clearance of inflammatory mediators and pathogen sources of life-threatening inflammation. Candidate indications include number one cause of hospital deaths in the United States. And in regards to improving patient responses to chemotherapies, immune prep enhances the delivery of immunotherapeutic antibodies. Chemo prep is designed to enhance the delivery of chemotherapeutic agents. And ChemoPure is designed to reduce toxicity. And with that, I open up the floor to questions.
Great job, Jim. We do have some questions for you. Starting off with, you referenced the capabilities of Sigyn Therapy. So how does it compare to other blood purification technologies to treat this pathogen-associated conditions?
Thank you, Anna. So I referenced our belief that it has unprecedented capabilities. We have colleagues at a company called Cytosorbents who have advanced the technology. This is a great team, publicly traded company, that have advanced technologies to address inflammatory mediators, but not pathogen sources that cause life-threatening inflammation. There is a company called Spectral Medical, again, publicly traded, based in Toronto, that's advancing a device to address endotoxin, which we address, but not other inflammatory mediators or other pathogen-related factors. And this is another good company, well-run, publicly traded, market cap at around 150 million. Previously, I oversaw the development of a medical device, a blood purification technology to address life-threatening viruses. And this was a technology we developed from concept to becoming the first medical device to receive 2 breakthrough designations from FDA, to be approved under emergency use provisions to treat life-threatening viruses. This was a technology that drove a market cap of about 200 million at one point in time. And it was named a top invention and a top medical breakthrough by Time magazine. But still, that technology, our focus was viral pathogens. And whereas Sigyn Therapy can address viral pathogens, bacterial toxins, and inflammatory mediators. And interestingly enough, I didn't know at the time when I did this, but a number of years ago, I was asked to testify before Congress on how to address emerging pandemic threats. And I said there would be a need for a technology that could address emerging pathogens that are not addressed with antiviral drugs or vaccines, and would not be able to control those. And the device would also need to be able to control rampant inflammation, which is based on the overproduction of these inflammatory mediators. And this contributed to the US government to expand the definition of a treatment countermeasure to be inclusive of medical devices. And we're kind of proud of that because in the COVID-19 outbreak, the first 5 technologies or therapeutics to be approved under emergency use authorization to treat COVID-19 were all blood purification technologies. So you see a growing trend and interest in these types of technologies, especially when new pathogens emerge where there's no other treatment countermeasure.
Fascinating. So Taryn Silva asks, is the dialysis technology and the device shown, is that the main vertical to revenue, or are there others?
Well, that's the initial vertical to revenues, but we tried each of our devices, and we think this distinguishes us from other players in the space, is that when we designed a device, we had a prerequisite that it had to provide a potential strategic competitive advantage to companies in established industry segments. And so in the dialysis segment, we believe we have confidence in our technology's ability to be able to provide benefit to the ESRD patient population. But we designed this with a focus to provide one of these companies a strategic competitive advantage. And we'd like to think that that would be a primary value driver versus us getting our product approved in the long-term, income generated from sales. And we think that with each of these devices, we'd like to think clinical execution, being successful in demonstrating that our technologies are safe, that they are effective, that they are recognized as being valuable to other organizations. And it's not just the dialysis industry, as I mentioned, with immunotherapeutic antibodies, especially. The values placed on assets in this area are significant, and the ability to enhance the benefit of these therapies, could be very valuable to biopharmaceutical companies.
With that, Lyle Bennett asks, are you reaching out to big biotech now, or is it too soon?
We actively communicate with colleagues in the dialysis industry, but with biopharmaceutical companies, we need to execute on our plan a little further. And this, will include the beautiful thing about working with medical devices is you can collect a lot of data where you can demonstrate how effective in vitro your device is in removing different targets to incorporate different antibodies. And so our initial objective here is to develop a collection of data that demonstrates in vitro how effective these types of devices can be, and then leverage that to initiate communications with the biopharmaceutical industry. But our viewpoint is that the interest becomes real at the point in time when you file an IDE to initiate human studies. That's kind of what rings the bell at larger companies to take you seriously. But the opportunities are significant.
Paul G says every biotech company in the world has been hindered with these high interest rates. So talk a little bit about what your funding looks like and your ability to move forward with a healthy bank now that interest rates look to have peaked and they start coming down.
Yeah, I wish I could say more about our funding. Previously, we've been funded with lead investors that did considerably well, with investing in my last company. And then we've expanded with a group of institutional and angel investors that have been very supportive of us as we've kind of put our foundation in place. We do now need to do a larger financing, but I'm restricted on talking about that because we have an active registration statement on file.
Makes sense. Alma asks, what is the monthly burn and are you comfortable with funding it? Is it being funded with equity or debt?
It's been primarily funded with a combination of both equity and debt. A large portion of the debt has consistently converted, and we'll expect to see that continued trend. But the burn rate, it's historically, our burn rate has been below $300,000 per month, which is, I think to accomplish what we've accomplished with that level of burn, to get to this point should be appreciated by others. But the reality is, I mentioned we're preparing to initiate first-in-human studies of Sigyn therapy. Once you get into the clinics, that burn's going to change.
Kyle wants you to clarify, is it $960 million per month in extended revenues, or is that per patient?
That's per month for DaVita's patient population. So again, chronic inflammation, endotoxemia are untreatable conditions that impact the lifespan of their patients. And so we calculated based on their entire patient population, if you were able to extend that patient population's life by 1 month, what value would that be? And we collaborated with some senior executives at a dialysis organization to really understand clearly what's important to them. And the other thing, I didn't get into the details of this technology, but it should be appreciated that when we designed the technology, we designed it to have flow rates go through our device that are compatible with dialysis, so that you don't have to, the doctor treating doesn't have to slow down or speed up the dialysis blood flow rates. We have it so it corresponds with the same blood flow rates. Our technology goes in series with the dialysis cartridge, and by being able to correspond with the same rates, patients can be treated during their normally scheduled dialysis treatment, which is 3 times a week, 4 hours a treatment. And, I hope people appreciate that we were able to design this device to be optimally used in series with dialysis cartridges to impact in a beneficial manner ESRD patients.
And we can probably end with this question depending on time, but John wants to know, with all your devices, do you have a 24-month timeline or goal, and where are you at the end of 2029?
Yeah, so we have internal objectives. We need to be up and moving forward in the clinics. As a medical device, a class 3 medical device, our challenges from a regulatory standpoint are to demonstrate safety. Historically, safety studies have been 12 to 15 patients. Based on the prevalence of chronic inflammation and endotoxemia in ESRD patients with 3 clinical sites, we feel like we can move forward in that study quickly. And then for class 3 medical devices, the next stage are pivotal studies to demonstrate efficacy. And those studies it again depends on indication, but historically can range from 50 to 300 patients. But where we want to be is we want to have Sigyn therapy moving out of feasibility studies into pivotal studies and have our pipeline moving forward clinically at the same time.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jim, so much for joining us. Again, it's great to follow along with your progress and important work you're doing.
Thank you, Anna. Nice to see you.
All right. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back with ASP Isotopes.